I'm going to talk to you a little bit about hyperconverged and some of the practical advantages of a hyperconverged solution. Okay. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ted Tramaloni. I'm the North American Business Development Manager for Ross Video, and I work in the switcher and servers group. So as you probably know, we manufacture, 25 or so different products, and we probably have another 5 or 10 services that we provide. So we have a whole range of products and services that we offer, and they're split into groups. And I work in the group that mines the production switchers and the production servers, which is the Tria, the Mira, and the Kiva server. So if you ask me questions about robotics or something like that, I'm likely not going to be able to answer them. I do want to say that although I did this presentation and I created it, it was actually originally developed by these two gentlemen. Two of my colleagues, Alan Fryer, presented something along this line to SMPTE at NAB this past year. And he and Chris Lennon actually did a lot of the research that I'm going to be talking about. So I don't want you to think that I'm the smart guy, because trust me, I'm not. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about what hyperconvergence really means, okay? Because I've found that there's a lot of confusion when we talk about hyperconvergence. It's a computer term. A lot of us are not so computer literate. I'm not certainly as computer literate as I am broadcast literate. So let's talk about what that is. So Alan Fryer said that hyperconvergence is combining what was once multiple independent products into a single software-defined product, okay? Which sounds really great and really important, but what does that really, really mean? Well, I'm going to talk about the distant past, the old days, back when we were all younger, like, before 2007. So back then, I was a freelancer. I freelanced for 20 years. And when I would leave the hotel in the morning, I would be carrying a camera of some kind, either a still camera or a motion camera. I'd be carrying a calculator. I'd be carrying a PDA or a primitive cell phone of some type. Remember these Tom-Toms? Remember those? I'd have one of those in my pocket or in my kit. And I'd probably have my laptop, which was probably weighed 40 pounds, right? This morning, when I left the hotel room, I put all of that stuff, plus an alarm clock and a solitaire game, in my pocket. It's called a cell phone. So we can think of a cell phone as a hyper-converged hardware-software platform. It's combining what were once multiple products into a single defined product that contains the software. And that's kind of what we mean by hyperconvergence, okay? Now, I recognize that a cell phone bears little resemblance to a tech core or a production control room. I get it, I really do. But there are still some similarities that we can explore, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. So what does hyperconvergence bring to the table? Well, first of all, it brings simplicity. Hyperconverged solutions are faster and easier to deploy because they have fewer boxes to install. Those of you that have done installs, you put a router in, then you cable the router to a production switcher, then you got to take production switcher out, go back to the router. Okay? Hyperconverged solutions don't do that. There's less cabling to run. And there's less coordination between equipment suppliers. I hear this all the time. One throat to choke, right? We've all said it at one point or another. I'd rather buy from a single vendor because their stuff is supposed to work together. I don't have to worry about this box from Ross doesn't talk to this other box from somebody else. And the components are designed to work together to begin with. That's the whole idea. On your cell phone, those apps work together. They know what they're doing, right? Hyperconverged solutions are flexible, much more flexible. And that's because the software-based components are easier to upgrade as needed and reconfigure as needed, and the modular systems are easier to grow. And I'm going to talk a little more about that in just a couple of minutes. It doesn't require the adoption of pure virtualized or cloud-based solutions. Now, we all know for sure that cloud is here to stay. Virtualization is here to stay. We're all going down that path, guys, right? But we're not there yet. And I would suggest that at least in the spaces that I work in, corporate video, houses of worship, broadcasters, call letter stations, and so on, I would suggest that cloud-based solutions are really still in their infancy. Hyperconverged solutions don't require you to adopt that kind of a workflow. And as a result, they provide more streamlined workflows than separate components because, as I mentioned earlier, the components are designed to work together, much like the apps on your smartphone, okay? They use a common user interface and unified administration. This sounds like a really, who cares? But think about this. If you have a platform and you have to train all of your operators to use that platform, and then there's another platform with a completely different UI that works completely differently, and you got to do that again, that's not a very streamlined workflow. And the tighter integration between all these apps means you have greater efficiency. And I will, as you'll see, I will suggest to you that greater efficiency is a bottom line thing. It saves real, honest to God dollars, okay? Hyperconverged solutions are by definition more sustainable, okay? Because they're more energy efficient, because in most cases they're smaller, they use less power. They require less cooling. And they need less space. And that's going to come back. I'm going to show you something about that in just a couple of minutes here. And they are far more energy efficient than virtualized or cloud-based solutions. I don't know if any of you have done any investigation into cloud solutions. I did a little bit of reading on this when I was putting this together, and I found that one cloud vendor, which shall go unnamed, the server farms of that vendor in the United States alone consume more power than the entire country of Denmark. So we think these are really energy efficient, we're reducing our carbon footprint, we're just shifting it somewhere else. That's all we're doing. Virtualized solutions, because they're smaller, more streamlined, they're more compact, they need less power and less cooling. And when you finally do have to take that box to the landfill, there's less of it to take. And I'll give you a quick example of that. So in my little town, I live in New Hampshire, and in my little town in New Hampshire, every year the Boy Scouts run a little thing. You can bring your electronics down, and you give them a donation, and they recycle them. Now, I've been doing it for, I don't know, 20 years. And it used to be you'd bring your tower computer or your monitor down there, and they would say, $5, here you go. $35 now. Because it costs them that much money to recycle it. So the less you have to recycle, the more you're saving, okay? And then finally, these things are cost effective. Whoops, cost effective. Because they require less power and cooling and all of the rest, that translates into real world savings. These are real dollars that your financial guys are going to look at and say, oh, wow, look at that. We saved some money last year. The upgradable features means you can extend the useful life because you can add more features over time. We just came out with some new software for one of our platforms that I'm going to mention in a minute here that enabled a new feature on my production switcher. I didn't have to change any boxes out. I didn't have to do any firmware upgrades. All I did was connect to the new software. Done. Right? And in a lot of cases, the equipment itself, the hardware itself is modular, so you can expand it over time without replacing the entire box. And if you're doing any kind of remote work or shipping your gear in fly packs or anything like that, it reduces shipping and reduces production costs. Let me show you something about this. So your ROA is going to go up, while your total cost of ownership is going to go down. And as I mentioned, this is a big one, and I'm going to show you something here. So you probably are all, well, maybe you're not. Do you all know that we have a remote truck division? Anybody? Ever heard of us? No? Ross Mobile Productions. We run, I think we're up to 8 trucks now. Most of them are based on Sprinter vans, although we do have a 40-foot box truck that we use for larger events. This is a picture of Fin 3, one of our Sprinter vans. And I'm going to give you just some baseline specs on this box. It's a 128 square router. It's got a 2ME carbonite in it. It's 12 camera capable. And this thing runs a gross vehicle weight of about 22K, 22,000 pounds. Okay? So, in a traditional design for this particular vehicle, we have a router, a switcher, some multi-viewer, frame sinks. We got all this stuff. And it totals about 43 rack units, about 500 and almost 600 pounds, and it eats up about 4.4K just to turn the thing on. Right? Let's compare that with a hyperconverged solution. 19 pounds, 1K. Every one of these things is included in the one 5 rack unit platform. Now on a Sprinter van, that's pretty significant because there's not a lot of room in a Sprinter van. And if you imagine a bigger truck, when I freelanced for a very long time, and I would get on trucks that would literally have in the back 3 racks full of just converters. Y'all seen this. What if you could reduce it all down, right? That's a savings of about almost 100% of the weight, 77% of the power, and you've picked up 86% more space in the van. And all I've done is replaced everything with one hyperconverged box. So, check this out. This Sprinter, based on the numbers that we ran, would save about 160 gallons a year, and the Jenny, because it has to work less, would be about 1,000 gallons a year. That would be a net savings at last Friday's prices of about $5,000 a year. It's actually about $4,800, right? So if you are in a facility or you work for a facility that has some trucks, or if you have fly packs that you need to ship around, you're going to save real dollars with hyperconverged solutions over traditional end-to-end box solutions. Okay? You'll also reduce your carbon footprint by about 12,000 metric tons a year. That's the equivalent of removing 3 cars a year off the road, every single year. And you have the added benefit of when you actually do have to recycle this thing, you're going to throw away less, which means you're going to save more money. Okay? So there's all kinds of really important reasons to think about what these hyperconverged solutions can do for you. They're simple, they're flexible, they're sustainable, they provide a streamlined workflow, and they can be very, very cost effective. Does everybody, I see some skeptical faces in the crowd already, right? I see some folks, I'm watching you. So we think hyperconverged solutions make a ton of sense for all kinds of reasons. Right? And I happen to think that this hyperconverged thing is a long time in coming. I've worked at various stations. I've worked on trucks. I've done my share of that grunt work. And I think the whole notion of hyperconvergence makes a ton of sense. If any of you have visited our booth today, I think you were there, and I said, yeah, you see that 2 rack unit chassis over there? That's the router. It's also the switcher. Oh, wait, all of that? Yeah, it's also the multi-viewer. All of that, 2 rack unit. Yeah, Right? The only reason I brought the big box down is because I wanted to have a working expression, and I don't have the 1RU unit, so I had to bring one. Now, what that meant was yesterday when we set up, we had everything up and running in about an hour. We ran into some issues because I had to move some things around, and we were short on cables and stuff, so we wound up taking us a couple hours. But the basic idea was set up in probably an hour because it's one box. Plug it in, turn it on, off you go, right? So, how does that translate to something like a production switcher? Well, this is what production switchers used to look like. And yes, it's not ours. It probably had an outboard DVE. Remember those? Anybody ever tried to buy one lately? Probably had an outboard still store. Remember those? By the way, when I was pretty new to freelancing, Turner used to come to town to do basketball, Celtics basketball. And they would hire me to do nothing but run the A42 still store. There is not a sweeter gig on planet Earth, guys, let me tell you. Because the pay is the same and you're getting stills. That's all you're doing, man. You probably had an outboard clip server. Some proc amps and color correctors that you had to be able to interface with, and that was probably an engineer in the back doing it for you. And you had to have some sort of multi-viewer, or you had separate monitors, one or the other, right? Depending. Well, that was then, and this is now. All of that stuff is in a switcher, right? All of that stuff is in the switcher. You don't buy standalone, sorry?
That's great.
It is nuts, right? It is nuts. And I'll tell you honestly, there are times when I think this isn't such a great idea for me as a TD, because it means I got to manage more stuff. Now, fortunately, the tool sets are pretty sophisticated and it makes it pretty easy to manage, but you still have to manage it. So there are times when I think, you know, I wish there was somebody in the back doing the color correction. But that's what this stuff has become. Production switchers are hyper-converged devices now, because they have all that stuff in there, and it's all done in the chassis. Okay? You've seen, if you came over to our booth, you've seen this. This is our Ultrix routing and processing platform. We manufacture 4 different kinds. There's only 3 shown. I'm not sure why I didn't put the 4th one on, but I didn't. This provides video and audio routing. As you might expect, it is a router. Audio muxing and demuxing on everything, multi-viewers, frame syncs, 12 gig gearboxing, MADI audio, audio mixer, the whole 9 yards, and it's transport agnostic. And we looked at this thing and we thought, you know, that's a pretty good box. We also have these other boxes that are production switchers. There's Acuity and there's Carbonite. Those are pretty good boxes too. How about if we put them all together? How about if we did this? So our clever engineering guys and our clever development guys took a Carbonite switcher and an Acuity switcher and they put it in a single blade that slides into an Ultrix frame. That is a Carbonite production switcher. The switcher that you're looking at when you come over to visit us on the booth is that. It's called a software-defined production engine. We abbreviated SDPE because we all love acronyms. This is it. This is 2 MEs, 4 mini MEs. Color correctors, proc amps, frame syncs, all of that stuff in there. I can also reboot it as an Acuity ME. So if I have 4 of these in an Ultrix platform, I can have a 4 ME Acuity. I can also reboot it as something called a mosaic image processor, which will allow me to do multiple displays, span multiple displays, in-venue displays, iMag, things like that. And all I do is reboot the thing with the new software. I don't have to change to a different piece of hardware. I don't have to recable anything. All I do is change the software that's running on this thing. And this hyper-converged production engine is the basis for our Ultrix Acuity and Ultrix Carbonite products. And it fits inside the router. So now, what have I got? Well, I've got a multi-definition router, processing engine for audio, the mixer if I want to add the optional mixing license, multi-viewers, frame syncs, all of that stuff. And oh, by the way, I also have a production switcher sitting in there. Now, if you're running a fly pack, or you're running a truck, or you're in a facility that's got limited rack space, think about that. That's 5 rack units. The big box that I have sitting on the desk in our display right now that I'm using for expression for the CG, that's 4. This thing is only 1 rack unit larger, and it has all of that stuff. The expression has in it expression. Actually, it has more because it's actually a switcher, but We won't go there. Okay? So it's very, very efficient. And here's the other cool thing. This morning when we were setting up, I said to Josh, my colleague, hey, Josh, can you do me a favor? Build me a salvo that does this, 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 and this. Changes routes for me. Sure. So he built me a salvo. And I went to the production switcher, and I armed the macro, and I learned the salvo. And now I can change routes from my switcher. And I'm not having to do anything because it's all talking to one another. It's all designed to work together, right? So now you have, in addition to all of this stuff in Ultrix, you've got ME banks. If it's an Ultrix Carbonite, you've got mini MEs, transitions, keying, media stores, proc amps, color corrections, 2D DVEs, 3D DVEs if you're in Ultrix, and all of that stuff, including virtual aux buses, in as little as 2 rack units. How am I doing so far? Okay. So you can tie this up with various different control surfaces, but here's the thing. I know, see, this is what I know. I'm watching you guys. You're thinking, oh, wait a second, hold it. Aren't you putting all of your eggs in one basket, Ted? So you're going to put all of this stuff in one chassis, and when that chassis drops dead, you're off the air. And the answer is you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Well, you know what? I like this guy. My sales guy wants to talk to you. No, you're absolutely right. If this product, if the Ultrix that's running our booth drops dead, the only thing I have is an expression, but I got nothing to show it to you on. So there you go. But here's the thing. You knew I'd have an answer for this, right? We did some analysis, our guys did. And what we found is that the 3 most common failure points in contemporary equipment are cooling fans, power supplies, and the physical connectors themselves. Right? Those are the 3 most common failure points based on analysis that we've done from our own tech support guys. This is fairly standard in the industry. It's not very common, frankly, for a board to drop dead on you any longer. They're pretty reliable. Fans that overheat a board, that's a different story. Power supply, take a hit during a lightning storm, you're going to lose a power supply somewhere, right? And somebody somewhere is going to step on a connector someplace and break the damn thing. Those are the 3 most common failure points. Okay, so let's take a look at this whole room full of racks. And that room full of racks has hundreds of power supplies and fans and who knows how many connectors, right? Every one of those is a potential failure point. Every single one of them. If you replace all of that with a single hyperconverged platform with redundant power supplies, you've reduced that down to a whole slew of fewer failure points. So you're right. It is entirely possible for an Ultrix to go south on you and you lose everything. I would suggest to you that your chances of that happening in a traditionally designed tech core or control room are significantly higher. Significantly higher. And I can also tell you that in the 3+ years that we've had Ultrix for sale to the general broadcast community, we've never had one crosspoint card fail. Not one. We've had fans fail. We've had power supplies fail. We've never had one crosspoint card failure. Right? And I can also tell you from experience that most of the gear on the right-hand side of our table, the production switcher panel, some of the monitors, all of that stuff, the expression, all of that stuff lives in my office. And it gets shipped all over the place. Now, I have shipping cases. I bought proper SKB shipping cases, so they are well protected, but they do get beat up. And if you come by the booth, you'll see one of my displays is starting to flicker. Yes, sir?
Are the fans and power supplies in this Hyperconverged product user replaceable?
Yes. Yes.
Obviously monitored.
Sorry?
Obviously monitored.
Yes, so good question. Let me address both of those. So, can I go back one? If I go back one, yeah. So, For the routers themselves, you can buy brick supplies or you can buy a rack mount. And if you buy the rack mount, there's two supplies that slip in. You can pull either one of them out. They're hot swappable. The bricks are obviously, you can hot swap them because they're bricks, right? The control panel that I'm using, I only have one brick connected to it. You can connect two for redundancy, and it will also run off one of these. So you could have one of those powering the Ultrix and another one powering the panel if you wish. They are monitored, the power supplies themselves are monitored in our product called Dashboard. And it will pitch an alarm if there's a problem.
The fan slows down,
Same thing, yeah. And as a matter of fact, depending on what you're doing and which specific product you have, the front panel, this door has Dashboard running in it. It can pitch an alarm at you. So if your fan speed slows down below threshold and kicks an alarm, this will actually alarm for you. If you have one of our standalone products, like Carbonite Ultra, that is also a Dashboard compliant device, and it will also pitch an alarm. In that case, however, the front LED will turn red to let you know something's up. You better check it. So yeah, we do monitor it. We do have it so you can replace them yourself, the power supplies themselves. Now obviously, if you lose a fan, you're going to need to open the box up to get to it. But the tray it comes out. You can replace it, okay? You'd have to turn it off to do that though, for obvious reasons. But you don't have to take it out of the rack or anything like that, okay? We also manufacture it we have some customers that are using these products in fairly high heat environments. Not so much because they're very hot, but because they're very enclosed. And so we manufacture a product that you can add on to this, which is called Ultra Cool, which is essentially a rack of fans that will help you cool the thing down if you're in a very enclosed space, something like that. So we do have some customers that use that in addition to, and again, that's all replaceable as well. Is that right? Okay. And by the way, I should also point out that I mentioned that the router is monitored by Dashboard. So is the control panel. Yes, sir.
You said adding a Carbonite switcher to it.
Yeah.
Is that Carbonite Ultra or Black, or is it both just the newest version?
Yeah, good question. So there is no more Carbonite Black. We discontinued that product about a year ago. And it was replaced by a product called Carbonite Ultra, which is a standalone production switcher. This uses not the exact same software, but virtually the same software as that Carbonite Ultra product. So there are some differences between them, mostly to do with input and output processing, because in the Ultrix version of Carbonite, it has no dedicated, well, it actually does have a little bit, but it has virtually no dedicated I/O. That all comes from the router database. Whereas if it's a Carbonite Ultra, it has proper BNCs, well, it has mini BNCs on the back. So there's some differences that have to do with that, but essentially the software is identical. And that's what it's running on, okay? And as a matter of fact, if you have a Carbonite Ultra or an Ultrix Carbonite, you can create macros and memories from one and move it to the other, okay? Yes, sir?
API access and development for your hyperconverged product for control and management of your system outside of the ROS environment. That's something you guys have implemented, or is it only a ROS scenario?
No. So the answer is yes. The API for Dashboard is available. I believe, no, actually, I don't believe, I know. You can get access to the SDK by signing an agreement with us. And that's a pro forma kind of thing. It's more to protect your interests and ours. But essentially, you write to the Dashboard team, you say, I want to become a Dashboard developer, they send you the SDK, you sign the agreement, they send you the SDK, and you can do. But you can also create in Dashboard, out of the box, you can download it today, it's free. You can create custom dashboards. And those custom dashboards can address the API in Expression, Carbonite, VDCP. You can do all of that stuff right in it today. You don't need any kind of special anything to do that. If you want to write your own applications, that's probably a much more efficient way to do it than starting from scratch and trying to do it. Because all of the switchers are Linux based. So you can get into some fairly, if you want to really get to that level, it's going to be fairly challenging. Because you can use dashboard to do that, it's probably much more efficient. But it is available, absolutely. Yeah, and we have customers all over the place that are. As a matter of fact, DVG, give a little shout out to these guys. These guys do custom dashboards for many of their installations. So if they have customers that have a specific use case and they want to be able to provide a way for, let's say, volunteers at a church to run the switcher more easily, they'll create a custom dashboard that does that. And it really does make use, it's really burrowing right into the carbonite. It just, to them, it's just, they push buttons on a screen. Okay. And I should also point out that while we're on this topic, one of the things that makes, and by the way, I'm obviously telling you this from the Ross perspective because I work for the company, but I'll also tell you that we're not alone in this. There are literally dozens of manufacturers that are doing something along this line because we're all starting to recognize we have to go down this road. We have to, right? We work, and I don't care what vertical you work in, what part of the business you work in, we work in a terribly, terribly energy inefficient system, right? For good reason, right? For good reason. I can't turn off my entire tech core every time I go home for the day. That's just not practical. But it does mean that I'm burning tons and tons of energy to do that. It's costing me thousands of dollars to do that, right? And it's probably generating more heat than I need for the building. So we're not the only ones doing this. Other manufacturers are doing it. We're doing it. We believe it's one of the ways, along with virtualization and along with cloud-based systems, that we're going to be able to progress the industry to the next level without having to, well, first of all, cost an arm and a leg, but also save other things as well, right? I remember once at an SVG, anybody go to the SVG meetings ever? Do you do those? Sports Video Group? I was at one of their meetings in Manhattan a couple of years ago, and the VP of Fox Sports was sitting on a panel where they were talking about how much energy, and he said, guys, if I've got 15 trucks parked at a venue for Super Bowl, they're not getting turned off. They're not getting turned off for the 3 weeks that they're there. Once they're up and powered, they stay powered. I don't care. And I get it. I wouldn't. None of you would. But if you could leave them powered up and save, I don't know, 20% of the energy and 20% of the dollars, and the rental costs on the generators are 20% less because they're using less fuel, that's real savings. And at the end of the day, if the viewer at home sees no change in the viewer experience, what's not to like, right? So, I know we're starting to run a little late here. I think that's all I've got, unless you all have questions about this. Yes, unless you all have questions about this, and I've answered a couple already, but if you have more, yes, sir?
What are the cost differences between going this route and going the traditional?
Good question. It depends a little bit on what you're specifically talking about. So right now, the difference between a hyperconverged Ultrix carbonite and the standalone carbonite Ultra is probably not terribly big. It's probably 10 or 12%. So it's not a huge amount of money up front. And that's really where people start to say, well, wait a minute, hold it. Why would I not? What's the big deal? It's only 10%. The difference is, when you put it in, it's going to cost you less money to install it. It's going to cost you less money to cable it. It's going to cost you less money in electricity, manpower, staffing, heat, HVAC, all of that stuff. So over time, you're going to realize savings that go on year after year after year. And that is where you really start to see the difference in price. So the delta in the cost is not terribly much up front. It's the ongoing savings that will really start to make a difference for you. Right? Anybody else? If you have questions beyond this, by all means, stop over the booth. We'd love to talk to you. And if you have questions, go on our website. One of the things that we try to do is provide a lot of information and documentation on the website. So it's rossvideo.com. You can get a lot of that sort of stuff. There's there's manuals, there's all that kind of stuff. But you can also get a sense of how this thing looks in the real world, right? We have a case, so there's I know we got to stop, but very quickly, there's a case study. I think it's still on the website. So there's a truck manufacturer in Italy. Now in Europe, trucks are different than in the US. So in the US, trucks tend to be tractors. In the UK, they tend to be cab over. In the UK, in Europe, they tend to be shorter than ours. Ours, the limit is 53 feet. In Europe, it tends to be around 46 feet. So there's some differences between OBs, as they call them in Europe, there and here. This Italian truck manufacturer built one last year for a client, and they put in a hyperconverged platform with our Ultrix Acuity product for big major sports. They're doing Premier League soccer kinds of things, right? So these are big events. So they put in this hyperconverged 12 RU Ultrix Acuity. I think it's 4 or 5 MEs. So it's a big switcher. What they discovered in the design and build was they saved so much room, they put a second switcher in it. They put a carbonite in there as well. And the reason they did that is because now they can go out and do, when the truck is not rolling for a big event, they can rent it cheaper, use the carbonite, and save customers some money, so they've increased their business. And the only reason they were able to do that was because they had saved so much room by not having separate components to do all of this stuff. And I don't know if the case study's still on the website, but there were pictures of the inside of this thing, and it's like, oh, there's this, wait, there's another production switcher over here. That's just because they saved enough room to do that, and they were able to use the same amount of power on the truck. They could drive both of them if they need to. So now think about going into a venue. Your big switcher is doing the match, right? Your little switcher can be switching to venues signage. It can be switching to an overflow booth. It can be switching to concourse monitors. You can literally run separate shows for the same amount. That's real savings. So, as I said, come see us if you like to talk. I thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for coming, guys. Yeah, you're quite welcome.
I always find it quite interesting where people say it's all eggs in one basket, because in a non-converged system, if you lost the video route, you've lost the system anyway.
Yeah,
You need
absolutely.
to lose the vision with you. So in the same way,
See
it's
the
actually
latest
easier.
in broadcast and production solutions from over 40 of the top manufacturers in our industry, including Sony, Ross